So welcome. Uh, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction, and then we're going to jump into who the guests are for this conversation and why we're here. So we're living in a moment where stories about abuse of power are surfacing in very public ways. And whether we're directly connected to these stories or not, they tend to stir something in us. Anger, grief, numbness, confusion, maybe even a sense of helplessness. So this conversation is about understanding the deeper dynamics underneath abuse of power, psychologically, relationally, and culturally, and asking how we stay present, how we stay ethical and connected in moments like these. How do we support survivors without re-traumatizing ourselves? How do we understand power without collapsing into cynicism? And how do we begin shifting from models of domination towards models of protection and responsibility? And I'm honored to be joined today by two women whose perspectives are different but deeply complementary. One grounded in decades of clinical experience, and one rooted in regenerative leadership and inner transformation. So let's begin, and let me introduce our guests. So first of all, we have Dr. Jennifer White Baughan. Dr. Baughan is a seasoned clinician and trauma-informed mentor with decades of experience working with individuals navigating abuse, relational harm, and complex power dynamics. She earned her PhD in psychology from Alliant International University in San Diego, completed her bachelor's degree at Seattle Pacific University, holds an associate's degree from the University of Charleston, and pursued postgraduate work at UC San Diego Medical School. Jennifer has also taught psychology at the graduate level and has educated both international and domestic communities on post-traumatic stress, including in Sri Lanka following the tsunami and in West Africa after civil war. Her work centers on ethical discernment, boundaries, psychological safety, and strengthening the clinical presence of practicing therapists and helpers. She's currently developing a carefully curated mentorship container for practitioners seeking reflective support and grounded professional guidance. Jennifer brings both lived experience and clinical depth to conversations about trauma, responsibility, and repair.
I'm already crying. I'm already crying because I'm so proud of you. Jesus, what a life.
That is beautiful.
Issues.
She's my daughter. Did we say
that?
I mean, I think the names were a dead giveaway, but yeah, we can also say we are also talking about a daughter-mother duo, which I think is also incredibly powerful. And it's so wonderful that you get to enjoy your experience and who you are in this new way of kind of play, new and also revised way, because I understand that you've also done some collaborations in the past, and this is just, let's focus on what's happening right now and also shed some light for folks that have these questions of like, overall, what do we do? What does this mean? How can I understand this? What's my role? That's kind of what we're here to understand, to get a little more clarity on. And so let's go with our good friend, Bristol Baughan. Bristol is an Emmy-winning and Oscar-nominated film producer, executive leadership coach, and regenerative community weaver. Her work focuses on what she calls aliveness, the subtle but powerful energy of presence and truth that can guide individuals and cultures from extractive ways of being towards regenerative ones. Through coaching, writing, and speaking, Bristol supports leaders, creatives, and changemakers in healing burnout, transforming intergenerational patterns, and redefining power, leadership, and success for a more relational future. She brings a spiritual psychological lens to questions of culture, masculinity, and inner work as a foundation for outer change. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. And Koti. I mean, I don't have your bio in front of me, but it is an international badass who has a brand design studio. You're going to have to correct me if I get this wrong. Who has been consulting with all kinds of organizations and companies, doing beautiful work. I met her working when she was working with a company called Regenerators, and we were teaching regeneration principles to marketers. And she's been working with me and Inner Astronauts and the Regenerative Media Lab now for quite a few years, really doing what she's doing in this moment, which is helping to translate kind of the essence of aliveness that is emerging through me onto this planet through us and our collaboration and working with teams and how to be a bridge for that aliveness to come into form. And I'm deeply grateful for having you in my life. She's also the founder. Just riffing. She's also a founder of a company called Core, and she has been my personal style guru, but it's much deeper than just the outer style. It's really about supporting people in expressing their authentic soul self through their fashion and design. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I'm actually gonna just, rip that and have that be a soundbite somewhere for it. That's perfect.
All right, awesome.
Appreciate. So let's see. I guess the first kind of question will be just, this isn't really structured. I just kind of want to get a little bit of a couple words from each of you on how are we doing with current news cycle, things that are emerging that may seem new, but we know for a fact that they're not. And just what's the, I guess on a personal level, what's present, let's say.
I've been losing my mind. And when we say trigger and we say, that it's history, that's kind of a misnomer because triggers mean that it triggers the past back into your day to day, right? So it doesn't feel like past. It feels like some of the dynamics are very present for me. And not just that, but the societal response to this issue of sexual assault, particularly on the bodies of children. It's more than I can say how I'm going to get emotional. It affects me deeply every day. And it's because this was my calling and this is what I chose to do with my life. And I've worked with traumas of all kind, war traumas and sexual assault, rape. So it's not been the only thing I've treated, but this has been the core of what I care about. And so watching particularly the Epstein survivors and the response of our government is like what happened inside my own family, where there was an ignoring, there was a diminishing the importance, and there was a lack of accountability and responsibility amongst the people who perpetrated. And so this is a replay, and it makes it very salient. And I'm angry at the same time that I'm sad, and I've been like this since I was a teenager. So it takes me back there. I try to get away from it, and yet there's a way that I feel a responsibility to not turn away, because I feel like that's what's happened through decades and hundreds of years, actually, is that women haven't continued the fight. And when we did fight, no one listened. And that simply is no longer acceptable. It's just not an acceptable response. Sorry.
No, that's exactly right. So I think what I've been aware of is, yeah, like when I think about it, I can feel pressure in my chest. I think what happened for the beginning was a sense of despair. It was just, I also lost a friend a few months ago. So I that grief mixed with the onslaught of images and stories of predatory behavior on young women and boys was something that just led to a sense of despair. Like, fuck this, fuck you guys, fuck the way that we've done this now for a few thousand years. And it's only been a few thousand years, and no one knows that. And I'm pissed that no one knows that there were other ways of living and being in more of a partnership matriarchal model that works better for everybody. And so I think, so there's been a lot of anger and upset and frustration and despair and heartbreak for my mom and other people who have survived, who are 1 in 4 women that have survived sexual assault. And so,
And by the way, that's probably a low number.
of course, because
This is what we know of reported
That's right.
abuse.
Yeah. And so there is an excitement because this conversation is continuing. But usually there's a flash in the pan and it's like, oh, well, this is just the way it is. So now it's like, why is it the way it is? And who's responsible for changing it? So that's kind of where we can get into some of the other questions, but it's been emotional roller coaster for sure.
I appreciate the candor and the vulnerability in both your answers. And I think that so many people can resonate with both these ways of connecting to what's happening as a lived experience or as the lived experience of someone that was very close to you. So yeah, we've talked with Dr. Baughan in the past, depending on the age that you were when something happened in your family, even if it didn't happen to you, I think you're still technically considered a survivor of that situation. And so I think that you'd be hard pressed to find people in any situation that have no connection to what's happening and they might not realize it. And so I think that probably what's good about just the normalization, let's say, of this conversation is that people can identify it faster for themselves, for a loved one, and hopefully the goal would be collective accountability for it. But I appreciate both of you being incredibly vulnerable and bringing your full selves to this conversation, because I think that's actually what's needed in the conversations that are taking place, and they're not theoretical and from like a very third party, far away role. I think most of us have thought when stories like this surface publicly, a lot of people say, how did this go on for so long? And nobody, was any the wiser, or they were. From your clinical experience, what actually allows abusive power dynamics to persist even when people suspect something isn't right?
Well, this is a layered question, right? I would say the first thing is secrecy. Because it's a sexual issue and because it often involves children, this is not okay. We say that as a society. It's not okay for you to have sex with the body of a child. A child's body is not biologically ready for sex. They're not hormonally ready for sex, and they're not psychologically ready for sex. So when someone breaks that boundary, that is a child who already begins to distrust the world and people in it, and the people that they're related to, because most abuse happens with somebody the child knows. And so if it's in-house, that makes it even more complicated, but we call it complex PTSD, and that's the response that some children, many people have to having a sexual assault early in life. And that complication is there because it has to do with the fact that child is psychologically developing. They're in the midst of their development. This is not an adult who can make a decision. It's not an adult who can give consent. And just because their bodies respond, because that's the biology of who we are, does not mean that you are given permission. And so, this is something that affects you for the rest of your life to some degree or another. And it affects people differently, depending on your personality and depending on what your supports are in your own family. But you ask a really important question that has a bigger implication, and that is, how does this happen that we don't find out, right? And we have systems that are set up to support this in society, and you see that in our government. We are acting this out in the United States right now, absolutely, where people are willing to deny, are willing to think that this person in power or the people in power somehow are above the law. Now, how do we get there where people ignore? And I think it has to do with our egos. I think that once we have decided that we are going to back someone, then it's no longer about them. It's about our own sense of self. And so we will stand up for that even when we know they're in the wrong and they're criminals. But the other thing is that we have mores that have been with us for hundreds of years. And many people won't like what I'm going to say, but we made God a man. And that has had implications. We have made men leaders. That has had implications. Because I think when you put power and you concentrate it in one gender, then what you do is corrupt both the men as well as the women who are seen as second-class citizens. And that's called patriarchy. And we've had patriarchy for a very, very long time. And the planet is suffering, and the inhabitants of the earth are suffering. And we've seen that it leads to very deep corruption of human souls. We see it in Trump. We see it in the Republican Party that won't do anything, that won't stand up and say, no, that's enough. We see it in the people who voted for those people in the United States, but this is all over the world, where women are relegated to second class and they're not listened to and they're dismissed. They're dismissed in their own homes. Women are leaders. They're intelligent. They're intuitive. Women have power to give birth. We are formidable. And that's what has resulted in patriarchy to some degree, because we threaten those people that want to obtain and retain power. That's my answer for
Amen.
now.
Amen.
I'm sorry, I get preachy.
No, I mean,
not at all.
I don't think it is. I think I feel a sense of relief when someone has a strong stance, because it's like, oh, there's something I can articulate myself behind that's making sense for me. And I think that this is why the conversation is going to be really interesting, is because you're bringing, the science and the clinical experience behind it. And so it kind of starts to make sense from a rational point of view, but there's also the lens of who we are as humans at our core, and that this is where the spiritual comes in. And I think that you touched on something that's incredibly important, which is we allow for these power dynamics to play out because we would compromise who we are if we need to review our stance about it. And this is identity. This is the story that we're telling ourselves about who we are and what the world is. And that's where Bristol's expertise comes in. And so I guess what I'm going to throw to you is, can you think of maybe a question that we can ask ourselves, or some kind of way to hijack that monologue or that story that is very, very hard to, because there's a fear of loss of identity, but beneath it. Is there anything that you can shed any light there for more of like an action item kind of moment?
Yeah. No, yeah, it's always good to hear my mom fired up. The question, I mean, there's a few questions. The first one that came to mind was really, how am I consciously and unconsciously continuing to prop up these patriarchal systems that abuse power? What's the payoff for me to continue to prop this up? And we have to get, really honest with ourselves. And that's really hard to do. It's one of the things that, where denial comes in. When you say, how can this continue? How does this just continue to go on, right? It's like there is a very powerful mechanism that does exist inside of our psychology that we talk about when we talk about denial. And resistance is a similar word, but in the spiritual context, is what happens when the ego wants to protect its version of itself and what it has defined as success. So if success is having a certain amount of money, having a wife, having kids, having a husband, having these things that society and culture, our culture has deemed success, and you start to come anywhere near the threatening of my image of myself in my success or my potential for that success, then you are touching on my worldview, my perception of myself. And for some part of the brain is actually feels like it's a threat to my life. It actually feels to so many that they are in danger when there are infinite amounts of ego deaths we actually can have here on this planet. And this is one of them that we're now in a collective initiation around, right? We've been in it now for decades. This is not new, but we're at an interesting threshold in this initiation. And for me, I see it so clearly. The Epstein files and the abuse of women's bodies or bodies, especially children, is exactly the same as extracting from the earth. And so when we have power and the ability to do that, and it gives us something, especially gives our perception of ourselves something, even if that's a total illusion, it's something that we have now gotten into a rhythm around that it's going to take quite a bit of momentum to break. And so how do I consciously or unconsciously prop up patriarchal systems? What's my payoff? What am I trying to protect? But the deeper spiritual question that gurus and people have been asking for thousands of years is, who am I? Who am I? There are free videos all over YouTube where you can sit with great teachers like Ganguji and Adyashanti and people that have been deeply in meditation around who am I? Because once you actually do any level of meditation and spiritual work or psychological work with a trained person, you start to identify all the bullshit and all the stories that we've been conditioned to believe about ourselves and have picked up along the way in order to be so-called successful. And so, for example, for people who are like, I'm not really exactly sure what you're talking about, my example is having been really obsessed with being somebody who was going to change the world, that I had to be so good that I could make the world a better place, and then everybody would know it, right? It wasn't just my helping out at the food kitchen. It was a sense of I want to be Martin Luther King Jr. That was me at like 6. And I want to be these people that do these almost saintly acts in service. And it was getting to a moment of, in my own spiritual journey, of having to have that layer of ego be the thing that had to go. Because it was actually me in an effort of power, trying to get power, thinking that power was going to lead to the impact I wanted to make. And it is this really sexy lure. And
Seductive.
It's so seductive. And that's something that I want to make sure we talk about, which is that I see my own behavior in the film business, which is like, and I'm thinking of Hillary Clinton, bless her heart, like that when you are in these levels of patriarchy, when you're competing to win, and I was competing to win because I was there to save the world. So I was not competing to be just rich and famous, although that was definitely going to happen too. No doubt about it.
Win.
Yeah, no, that was it. It was like, it was always back there, but it was more unconscious. It was like, I don't need that. I'm here to just make an impact. Anyway, so when you get into the competition to win patriarchy, to win capitalism, that is when the tolerance for bad behavior goes up, up. I don't support Jeffrey Epstein. I'm using his plane to go do philanthropic work. Oh, there just happens to be cute girls on the plane. Oh, I'm not going to ask how old they are. Right? I mean, this is... And then we've got the wives who know this behavior is happening, but boys will be boys. You got to deal with some bad behavior to play at that level. And so part of what's going to have to shift is all of us that continue to prop up and protect them in positions of power because they're less worse than whoever it is we're more afraid of. Where it's like, no, they all got to go. They all got to go. And we all have to believe that's possible. Because without believing that's possible, we do this again and again and again and again.
Like cyclic. It's cyclic.
Which she said before we got on the phone was like, I just don't believe that anyone is gonna really hear what I have to say.
Yeah.
And I was like, now that belief from a spiritual perspective is part of the problem.
Yeah. It is.
And the heartbreak that she's had to go through over and over and over again of standing up and standing up and standing up and standing up in all the places where kids are supposed to be fucking protected.
Well, and I made it my mission in my life that I was gonna, just like you were messianic for the saving the world, I was gonna save all the survivors. I was gonna be their voice, and I was able to do that. I mean, I went to court. I was able to be that voice, but that was also me working to try to heal myself. And I've been in every kind of therapy that I could possibly be in my life, but it was that wanting to work at this in some way that I could change in a large way this world that has begun to accept that it's okay to have your needs met through damaging anyone else on the planet, anyone else in any way on the planet and the planet. And it's not acceptable. It's not okay. And it's not just not acceptable because I'm a girl and I should be kind and I should be nice. And I'm fucking done with that. I'm fucking done with that. Yeah, I'm 75 now. And if I don't talk, if I don't get my voice out there to say that, it's over. It's over. And men need to work with men. No, we don't need to make girls more resilient. Ashley Judge spoke to this earlier. We don't need to make girls more resilient. We need to figure out why the resilience is needed. And we already know. So men, you've got to do better. And women who support those men, you are not helping them. You are enabling them not to grow up. When you enable a man to hurt your children, when you enable a brother, enable a boyfriend, or you're a man sitting in a group and someone like Trump tells a joke and they're with the gold medal winners of hockey from this year, and he tells a joke like, I'm going to have to include the women's team, you know that, and they all laugh. That's when you need leadership in the room. And they call it locker room talk. What it is abrogating your responsibility in that moment to stand up and say, I don't like that. I'm not hearing that. I'm not participating in it. I'm not here for that. And I don't care who says it, President of the United States or anyone else. It's not okay. And I won't do it anymore. I won't be in a room like that anymore and not speak up.
I mean, I don't know what your next question is, but we both just watched this TED Talk that I'm going to send to you for sure. We can link to it, is by Jackson Katz. And so I wonder if you could speak, because now that we're on this point, it's like, what are we learning about what needs to happen?
Well, I think he's particularly salient. He's in the United States. He's in the Bay Area. Is where he teaches, but he's also works with the military and the police and anywhere where we're using large groups of men in particular. And MVP Strategies is his business, but it's mentors in violence prevention is what that means. And so he talks about the bystander moment. And that's what I just gave an example of. That every person sitting in that room, these hockey players who had gold medals around there and they're supposed to be heroes, no one stood up and said, Mr. President, I don't like that. No one. They all laughed. This is the attitude that has to be looked at. And most women are here to support you men, to look at it, to see it, to begin to understand how you participate. But he puts the responsibility for sexual violence directly on men, instead of having it be about what she wore to the bar or that she's drinking and we're not saying you remove accountability from all women. That's not what my point is. But my point is that there's not been nearly enough accountability on the part of men. And men need to teach men how to lead men, not women. Men. They need to lead men. And they need to speak up. And so he has a video that's about bystander. He's talking about be the upstander rather than the bystander. So that's my
Yeah, no, it's, and there's something that happens to me every time I see a post from a man or somebody giving a talk like him. I mean, his voice was shaking as he gave this talk. Like his level of advocacy, his level of allyship has really been screwed with, that word, but it's his level of allyship, his level of showing up in a way that he says so clearly. He's like, this isn't just for about women. This isn't just for women. This is for men. This is for us. And now people finally starting to talk about how patriarchy is not good for anybody except the very few sociopaths on top. And we think we have to become sociopaths to be successful like them. That's why I have a client talking about how she had to have a doctor's note to come home in her last month of pregnancy because they were working her until 2 o'clock in the morning. And it's like this idea that we are become anti-life. And being anti-life is not only unsustainable, it's suicidal. And so this piece though, I feel for the parents of the young kids who are just like still trying to win capitalism. They're still trying to play. I get it. Like we all have to still have a foot in it. Where nobody's separate from it. But how we go about this, we have to be willing when that moment comes, when the thing that is happening, that is against our values, that is against what we stand for, that we have to be willing to risk our comfort, our potential safety in order to stand up and take a stand. And that's part of what he was talking about. Jackson Katz is talking about in his talk that I think was really powerfully done.
And I love to hear his voice shaking and cracking because I know that energy behind that's causing that is that he cares so damn much.
It's love.
It's love. And that's what's being, if we can just look at the lack of standing up for loving each other, you came through a woman or you wouldn't be here. You've got sisters, you've got mothers, you've got aunts. We are in this world together. And to dismiss anyone in your family because of gender, that's an illness. That's a misunderstanding of this world. And that's a spiritual emptiness.
And the men are feeling it. My God, suicide is
Yeah.
rampant. Like this is you can.
Well, they're lonely.
Loneliness epidemic.
They're
all
lonely.
of this stuff. And part of an ego that's trying to defend itself is to project that their loneliness is someone else's fault. It's someone else's problem to fix. And so now it's like, no, honey, welcome. Welcome to this initiation. We have to learn how to be in relationship. And the ways that we have learned how to do that have done us all a little dirty, more of us than others. And so now come into the fold with an energy of, I don't really know what's going on, but the ways that I've related in the past are no longer working for me.
And you're going to be a much less lonely.
Much less lonely, and I'll chime in with something I've seen a lot in my social group and I've seen on the media, which is the effect that patriarchy has on men equally as women. I think that women have a long history of understanding it and being able to conceptualize it as, oh, this isn't on me and my failures as a woman or as a human being. This is a collective, construction. And I think that a lot of men still have to make that jump into, this isn't me. Because what's happening all around me is I'm seeing men crumble, and I mean crumble, under the weight of these distorted images of what they think they need to be worthy. And we've all dealt with that, no matter who you are. I think it would be really hard to find someone who has any level of self-acknowledgement. We've all felt unworthy for different reasons. And that's a construction. That's no one should feel at any point. So I think that the more that we can kind of share that, hey, this isn't on you. This isn't it. My cousin just lost his job today due to the layoffs. because of AI. And I'm like, okay, let's reframe that. It's because of tech billionaires, not AI. AI didn't take your job.
Right.
A tech billionaire laid you off so you could buy a different
Yeah.
yacht.
Yeah.
Let's reframe. But I can see him spiraling into this is on me. This is my failure to protect my family. He has 3 kids and he's understandably distraught. And I'm like, this is not on you. You've done everything. You went to college, you got the hard engineering job, you did the whole thing, and you got laid off one day to the next. Please don't read this as a personal failing. And it happens across the board. Men have really, really distorted and impossible metrics, the same ones that women were complaining and continue to complain about of this is unattainable. And also, I don't feel good at obtaining this. Men suffer from it too. And they're happily starting to discuss it with a trained professional, but not all of them. So what I'm bringing up is it's heartbreaking because I see a lot of my really good friends in really vulnerable moments because they have this very patriarchal idea of what they need to be. And I think that what we're being asked to be is strong through softness, is I need to become so soft and so just so permeable and go through so many ego deaths. And it's so uncomfortable, but it's literally the only way to stay strong because the idea of strength, which is resisting against everything with brute force, we're seeing what happens when society decides that that's the way to survive.
Yeah, exactly.
And giving women some accountability too for these images that we've
Yeah.
held up of who men should be for
Yeah.
us, that they should do all the dirty work, that they should be out in the, snow and the cold and the rain and it's also our responsibility to face that men are people, just like we are. And we
Exactly.
all have to come out of patriarchy because it's impacted all of our worldviews. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
And
self-views.
it is. And I think that the other what comes up when we're saying we need to say something, right? We need to have this strength, this soft, feminine strength to be like this, this isn't working. But at the same time, there's a lot of just people being reactivated by these stories, people feeling like they can't because it's overwhelming, because it doesn't feel like you're getting anywhere, because it doesn't feel like anyone's going to listen to your voice. And I guess the question is, what is healthy also self-protection, but that enables us not to feel guilty because it's like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to pretend that it doesn't affect me. But so not shutting down, but staying as present as you can without overriding your own system. And I think that there's psychological, I guess, exercises or mechanisms to help us, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we can apply that to stresses, right? In everyday life, you have to have some time spent in the issue and then time away. And, and I'm not good with this because when you care about something so much, you can get fixated on it. And I can get fixated. And so my loved one, here she's doing like the phone, right? And my loved one has to say, go for a walk, turn your phone off, stop watching the news. And I have to not defend.
And I
Which I
have
do.
I have a question. Why do we fixate? What's the underlying connection to it?
I think certainly what I see biologically is that what this turns on in me is anger and fear. And so it stimulates a certain part of the brain called the amygdala. And when that gets stimulated, that's a more instinctual part of the brain. And it leads to kind of compulsivity, right? So that you keep repeating the same behaviors over and over again. And there's a little bit of a dopamine hit when you see something new or you think you've added to your information that you've gotten. And that's self-reinforcing. So you have to break that dopamine resistance. I don't want to get a little bit of a good feeling when I've found that there's someone else that's come out about their abuse, to look at that and understand that's not healthy for anyone. So it's a little bit of time in and then time out. Listen to your loved ones when they tell you you need some time away. And let yourself have the emotions. If you need to scream, scream. If you need to cry, cry. Don't stop yourself, and don't think that it's not okay, because those tears actually have stress hormones in them. That's why women live longer often than men, because when we cry, the stress hormones are released. And so those tears are beautiful and important, and it's part of our amazing biology as women that we cry more easily than men. So express the emotion, do some reading, do some time away, and also moving your body. Get some exercise so that you're moving that. So, because what you do is produce this cyclic adrenaline, right, hit. And your body, your nervous system then begins to depend on that over and over again, that you're going to get this hit of adrenaline, and it's going to make you more excited or more angry or more emotionally dysregulated over time. And the whole thing about learning, when you've had sexual assault or you've had these experiences, is how to downregulate your emotional system, and how to get yourself to get quiet. Don't watch any of this at night. Turn it off. By 7 p.m., don't do any more of it. Yeah. And stop reading books about it. If you've got 3 books on your nightstand that you're reading about sexual assault, yeah, that's too much. You're fixated. I also think, take a bath, listen to some meditation tapes, listen to music. So it's change up your state. So your state is biologically, and my nervous system, am I on high or am I on medium or low? And if you're on high, you can only sustain that for a short period of time until you start getting shots of cortisol, which is there to buffer you against stress. But what happens is cortisol, you can get fatigue, where adrenal fatigue, where you can't buffer anymore with the cortisol. Cortisol causes you to gain weight in your belly, and it's at high levels, it's not good for you. So we need to take this in small doses and talk to friends, talk to your therapist, talk to people who can hold space for you. But be careful. Even those that hold space have to watch themselves, because we who listen also are having our nervous systems triggered over and over again. So we're all the same in terms of our responses to stress. And some are at high, and some of us, have less response. But if you have a high response because you have a history of sexual assault, then you need to really titrate, meaning slow over time, keep watching, turn it off after about an hour. That's enough. It's more than enough.
And you brought up also the lived experience in your body, and in exercises with Bristol, we've also worked on, where does this live in your body and how to identify it, so you can kind of give it some level of entity and what to do with it. And I wonder if you can share some words around what we should be monitoring, because it's so easy to kind of just gloss over your sensations. And if someone asks you, you're like, oh, I guess I do feel a certain way in a certain part of my body, but we're just not trained to read them or to understand what it means. And so in this sort of, kind of self-protection, and what are the things that we should be kind of screening for in ourselves to understand ourselves better is the question.
Okay. I mean, from my perspective, I think you start listening to your heart rate a bit. And if you have a heart that's beating pretty fast and you can feel that, then you've got circulating adrenaline. And if you've got that, then you're already in a fight or flight state. And you need to do something to emotionally regulate down. And that can be meditation or a bath or, running, whatever floats your boat there. But I think when I'm thinking about what's important for sexual abuse survivors, that's kind of a different category than people who've not had this happen to them. So if you're a survivor, your nervous system is already likely to start leaking adrenaline into your system. Those gates get changed in childhood if it was child assault, and they can stay that way for the rest of your life so that you're more sensitive to your adrenaline and that feeling of fear or that feeling of being agitated. And also hyper alertness is something that we can get kind of addicted to. We get used to feeling this high level and we almost court it, right? We do things to increase that level. That's where it leads to drug use and things like that. And using alcohol to come down or using marijuana to come down and get to a more peaceful place. Over time, those are not healthy for you either. So we have to learn to downregulate by doing things that are healthy. I'm not sure if I answered your question. I think there may be more.
No, I guess the point of it is shedding some light on the mechanisms of what we're experiencing collectively, and then also giving, people listening, okay, how do I map this in myself? And then what do I do with that, once I can identify it? And this is a question actually for Bristol because it's related. When either the collective atmosphere feels really heavy or destabilizing, or you feel like you're unable to kind of ground yourself that way, how can we stay connected to aliveness without kind of bypassing the grief or the anger, which need to be present?
Yeah, I mean, well, part of what keeps you connected to a sense of aliveness is to feel your feelings. There will definitely be moments where you don't feel connected because there's something else that you're feeling. And so instead of judging it or just trying to be positive or get back to an ideal state, it's okay, what's here? When she says meditation, right? It's like sitting in, you could do 3 minutes of meditation. What's here? I do a body scan. I'm feeling some tightness in my chest. I'm feeling some gurgling in my gut, some pain in my lower back. Okay, which one feels most potent and powerful? Where do you feel energy the most? My lower back. Okay, let me take 3 minutes again and write. Literally just breathing into my lower back and write as if my lower back could speak. And then write. It's usually a bunch of fucks, and so it's I hate this and that, and I'm tired, and I wish we would leave me alone, and I just wanted to, whatever it is, no censorship, because something might be underneath that is looking to come through. Because when we're numb and in resistance, right, like smoking too much or drinking too much, or for me, it's watching too much television and not reading, which is something I want to be doing more of, but television's been my safe, cozy space, which is fine, but I just don't want to do it all the time. But once you realize you're doing it, then it's, okay, I need to have a conversation with a friend. I need to do some of the things she listed. And if you want to just know what's happening, it's being able to check in. And so doing that scan, writing from the body part can be really illuminating. And when you actually allow that energy to be here, actually give it permission versus resisting it, that's when energy starts to move. And so letting energy move is how you stay connected to aliveness. And when it's not there, having faith that you are connected to it. You're never not connected to it. It's always here. You've just lost the ability to feel it because something else is present. And that's okay. Because the other thing I just want to say for people right now, if you're smoking weed just to survive, fine. If you're on a bunch of anti-anxieties, fine. It's a hell of a time to be alive. Like, don't judge however you're doing it, unless you're hurting other people, of course. Then take yourself straight to the police. But it's like getting just some permission to just be as you are is usually the first step for people just to even become slightly aware of what their feeling state is. And if you aren't aware of it and you're going to therapy and your therapist is asking you how you feel and you're not able to access it, that's okay. That's a step in a process. Keep going. Mm-hmm. Keep working the process. Keep asking the question. And notice what your coping mechanisms are, because there's strategies that we've all learned how to adapt and survive in this place. And so part of the initiation, part of an ego sloughing is to recognize when those strategies are no longer working. And this brings me to a theme that I'm seeing across the desperate need for more. That is something I've talked about now for 15 years, that where I had to finally look at this fire hose that was longing, 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 and it could be aimed at anything. It was usually a man, must find the soulmate, that will make me full, happy, and whole. Oh, I must have the most impact in the world, make the most movies, do the most good. Okay, that'll make me happy and whole. Whatever it is I was aiming it at. There's something about that state where you can never get enough that is connected to these moments where men are doing horrific, horrible things, trying to get some sense of a high, of feeling dominant, of feeling powerful, of feeling relevant, whatever it is, unless they're a psychopath or a sociopath, then it's less about feeling, obviously. But this need for more, it's never enough. I've got to do more drugs to get high because I've hit a plateau. I need to go with younger women because it's more forbidden. I feel more powerful. I'm taking a higher risk and I'm getting away with it. And that's all y'all's fault. Y'all are stupid. I'm smart. I know how to navigate this thing. That same egoic state feels very similar. And we are all currently sick with this state of never enough, need for more.
This is where we get into the idea of sociopathic parts of personalities, and that, when you're talking about never enough, it's when we look at the men who have been involved with the Epstein files, what we see are rich men who've had a lot of power, who usually have a lot of money. And so what is it in that dynamic that causes those particular men to need to do what they did to children? What is it in that dynamic? And I'm going to suggest that when you have unlimited power and unlimited funds, that there is a way that our personality begins to distort and becomes perverted. It's part of capitalism, and it's part of having money and things and materialism drive our cultures. And those men become sick. We need to see it as a sickness, an illness, an aberration of what our souls come here to do.
Absolutely.
And it's time to identify it and talk about it. Hoarding money and resources is an illness. It's an aberration of our personalities and nature. It's not healthy. It's nothing to look up to. These men are not well.
And it's delusional at some point to think that you can forever accumulate. It's like, okay, first of all, I don't think you understand the physics of our world, where there isn't enough. There's definitely a finite number of the enoughness. And I think that that's also something I found when I'm trying to figure out, what am I looking at? What are my goals? I need to check myself, because it's really easy to slide into, oh, I want a nicer car. Oh, how nice would it be to buy this house somewhere? There's things that seem harmless, I think. I think that's the first kind of, and for the most part, they're not harmful inherently. I think what's harmful is the sense that you haven't asked yourself what's enough. Like, to where?
Exactly.
It's trance-like, right? I mean,
right.
There's a disassociation that's like trance, where people get used to, like machines, going to work. I just have to keep pumping out the money. I can't stop. I've got to do more to pump out more money. And that has really, I think, distorted who we are as human beings. And it's time now for us to, and past time, because I don't know how long we're going to survive to right this ship.
Yeah.
The world may not survive our avariciousness.
Yeah.
Because it's never enough.
It is never enough. We've built a story around infinite growth, and it's a lie in itself. It's not sustained on anything. It's baseless, let's say. And this segues perfectly into we're asking ourselves, what are new roles? What are new questions that we need to ask ourselves? And this is a question for Bristol, but for both of you. When it comes to masculinity, what's the difference between domination and healthy protection? And how can we invite men into protection and integrity without collapsing into the perversion of this idea of omnipotence, or into shame and blame because they're not enough? Like, is there a next step for men and for women? Let's say for both, because this is a joint narrative that we're all kind of involved in. Is the question clear?
Yeah, no, I think that.
I don't know if I have an answer to that. I mean, that's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is, for me, it's coming down to some things that you were just talking about, but it's, what do we value? What do we value? What are we teaching or modeling our kids in valuing? And really getting honest about our animal selves, especially when kids are young, and the ages and stages. These are things that I never learned about Erickson's stages of development until I went and studied it for spiritual psychology for years. But it's like, we should be learning this. There should be a basic spiritual and psychological education that we're getting, so that people understand one way to deal with that voice that says, do you know who I am? Is to play with it, not believe it, not immediately to start enacting it on other people, but to realize, like, whoa, that feels really powerful. Great. Look at some of the characters in a comic book and on a stage, and what are ways that you can use and get familiar with that energy without going unconscious in it, and then projecting it and acting it out on other people or animals. That's a lot to ask of a little kid, but I think we have to start really young. And they are. I mean, there's all kinds of beautiful things happening in early childhood education around emotional intelligence and body awareness, but like, this is not worldwide by any means. And it's still operating inside a context that is driving most people to think that the focus is on how they're going to get a job, and then how they're going to get things. And it's like, oh, no, we got to back up. We got to back up even from that. That, like, again, who are we and what are we doing here? But I think we have a lot of work to do in just letting go of old ideas of what masculinity and femininity is. Because it feels stale and stagnant, and it's just like, she talked about distortion, and Francis Weller talks about distortion when there's an uninitiated masculine, especially, where there's this energy that is very potent and powerful that comes in, especially in adolescence. And part of the indigenous tradition is to go out into nature and spend time and get to know what he calls the predator in your consciousness, this energy that feels godlike, that feels all powerful for some, and then it's the opposite end of the spectrum for others. I am nothing, I have no power, I am powerless. And getting to be in relationship with that energy in a way that is terrifying, where you start to learn that there's another voice here. There's an authentic voice. There's a sense of self that is connected to everyone and everything. So when they go through an initiation, the idea is for them to come out feeling responsible to their community. That's a healthy initiated masculine. To feel responsible to your community, to feel a part of it, not necessarily responsible for the whole thing. That can get distorted again. It's to see your place inside the circle of life, not at the top of it. This is the evolutionary moment we are in, is to get off the pyramid, the illusion of the pyramid, that we can be ever have a man on top, a human on top. No. We are just equal to all the rest of life. And that piece feels like this is where we're at. That this is the rainbow prophecy. We're at the divergence here where it's like, are we going to get into alignment with nature, with our authentic selves, with our souls, or are we going to have to play out this AI apocalyptic dominant fantasy? And this, we don't know. We don't know. And for me, when she talks about the world, like the world may not make it, it's like, my sense is like this place is here partly, I don't know, but partly as this classroom to come in and learn and grow. And so we undoubtedly are in a moment of learning and growing. And what do we want to learn? And how do we want to grow? Because the more we go into the dystopic, the more we go into primal state. So we're going to probably go back, which is so interesting because whenever you talk about regeneration and getting into alignment with the principles of life, right? People are like, oh, we can't go backwards. It's like, oh, you talk about indigenous wisdom. Oh, we're not going to go back to that. And it's like, the way that the mind fuck of what's happening right now is actually that what you think is going to lead to progress actually leads to your worst fear. And so wrap your head around that. It's like, we literally can't. And so it's like, okay, fine. If that's too big, come back to getting some awareness of what's here and what makes me come alive. And if what makes me come alive is a sense of domination, then I need professional help. That's it. Unless it's on a basketball court in a game scenario and you're able to go out and play and see what your body's capable of without having to make yourself better than everybody on the court. The best athletes most of the time that we see don't feel that way. They're there to be in their bodies and see what they're capable of in a moment with people that challenge them. That's us at our best. That's when we're at the Olympics. That's when we're seeing that this is what you do with that energy. You can play with it on a stage, you can play with it on a field, but you do not play with it in a way that has something to do with sex with children. This is not hard. Not hard. And what's so incredibly horrific, because I remember when these stories started coming out and I felt like I was inside of a big family and we all knew that dad was molesting our sister or brother. We all knew it. And yet we're all just there going, yeah, but I like my Sega. I like my TV. I like my car. I like what the life that this patriarch affords me. I'm not going to upset the boat. I'm not going to bite the hand that feeds. This is the place where we get into this loop of protect the fucked up systems because I'm too afraid for what it could be like in the unknown. And that it's somehow going to be worse than rampant trafficking and sex with children. No, y'all, doesn't get worse than that. It may temporarily while these men hold on to power. They may fight for it. So it's going to take all of us, and not even, I think it's like, what's the tipping point? It's like, I can't remember what the percent is, but it's actually not that much. It's like 12 or something percent. It's a small percent of us that have to get together and be like, enough. This is done. Regime change. You're out. And we will not put up this anymore. And if you are ever caught in this situation, you go to prison for life. This isn't a conversation. We still have to prove it. I believe in the rule of law. We're not going to cancel, blah, blah, blah. But right now we're at the other end of that spectrum, where people are not being held accountable at all in the United States. In Norway, they've already arrested somebody. In the UK, they've already arrested somebody. We, in the US, are currently dealing with a remarkable level of tolerance. And so, what are you tolerating? No, I got preachy.
Yeah, that's okay. Preach on, girl. Preach on. Yeah. So one of the things that I, you were talking about is, learning and the issue here though is also who teaches and who are you listening to? Because we've had a whole research that's for decades and decades in the US in particular, but also the world. So much of it was done on men. right? So this is part of the patriarchy. This is part of the system that has kept this in place, is who are you learning from? And if you keep learning from the same men, you're going to have the same outcome. You need to understand that women have something to teach. We have something that comes from deep within our own biology that men need to hear in order to be healthy.
Yes.
Men need to learn how to be with a woman, and we have to teach that. But if you're not willing, and that's been part of the issue, because for decades and decades, more women come to psychotherapy than men do. Now, why is that? Why is that when the issues are pretty equal, right? Because men think that they have to do it by themselves and they should know this already. Nobody knows this. Nobody knows how to live without these aberrations and distortions, where we have to learn how to do this together, trusting each other and giving a sense of respect and not dismissal for a gentler, tender, vulnerable way of being in the world that's much more conscious of, am I hurting you? Is what I'm doing harming you or hurting you? And that's going to be the first thing I think about. It is, if I choose to do this, will I harm someone else? Will I harm that child? Will she be distorted for the rest of her life in terms of her ability to trust anybody? Is that what you want to do when you're having a party with cute girls that are 12 and 13 and 14 years old? You're damaging somebody's life.
And if your answer to that is, I don't care,
you need help.
Yeah.
You need help.
You need help. And if that person is in your vicinity, you have a responsibility to report. You have a responsibility to call the cops, to talk to their spouse. Like, the idea of protecting these men is part of what has to stop. It has to stop. Because the one thing that she has said my whole life, and I think, no, actually, never mind. But one thing she has said my whole life is, like, there are predators. Like there's this new age kind of thing where people want to say, oh, it's anyone can change, anyone can transform. And I believed that for a while. And my mom kept saying, like, no, you don't know better, basically. Like, there are predators. And that's not to make you scared of the world. That's to educate you, to educate children, to understand when someone reaches out on the internet to you that's a stranger and asks for a photo. That is unhealthy behavior. I'm specifically talking about children. Adults, do whatever weird shit you want to do. But dick pics galore. But, like, to a child. So instead of, I don't want to talk about this with my child, it's, oh, no. You are irresponsible if you don't. And you are continuing to prop this up. And it's not to put the onus all on women. This is parents, all parents. It's like that piece of, there are predators. There are people with personality disorders that do not care. They get high, like Epstein, on facilitating powerful people doing crazy, nasty shit. And so those people have to be brought down right now, because mostly men are in power, mostly men are in those gatherings, by other men. That is their job to stop him.
And an addendum to that is, just like the Epstein survivors have been saying, we're not going away, and we're not going to be quiet, and we're not going to be silenced. That's over. We're coming for you. We're coming for you, and we're not going to stop. There's going to be no let up. I want them to understand that something has changed in the dynamic, and we are not going to be dismissed and unheard. We are going to get louder and louder and louder, and woe be unto you if you don't listen.
She's casting spells now.
I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary.